Okay, well, welcome everybody, all attendees that are joining this session. I see a lot of Dutch, also people from here, from I think even somebody from Spain. So this is starting up your office, or how to set up an office in Panama. And we found a number of good speakers on this that can tell you on how it works, how easy or difficult it is to set up a business here. Remco de Bruin, the director of Holland House Panama, which is the Dutch Panamanian Chamber of Commerce that was set up about 2 years ago to help entrepreneurs do business with Panama and facilitate economic relations between the two countries. So we do market research, helping with setting up a company, soft landing, and also finding partners. And we're organizing a trade mission now in the tech sector from the Netherlands to Panama. And this webinar is part of that, but it's open to everybody that is interested in setting up an office here. So let me give the floor first to Stephanie Pragnell from PROPANAMA. Stephanie?
Good morning and good afternoon to everybody. On behalf of the PROPANAMA team, I'd like to thank you and Holland House Panama for giving me a chance to join you today. My name is Stephanie Pragnell, and I'm an investment promoter at PROPANAMA, which is the national authority for foreign investment attraction and export promotion. So today I will lay out some context for you regarding the investment landscape in Panama, and there's a great deal to cover, so I will be brief. To start, as you may know, Panama is small, it's warm, it's receptive, it's dynamic, and it's located in the center of the American continent. And so we have a population of 4.2 million people and a GDP per capita, which of course is lowered in the last year, of $12,370. We qualify as what you would call an upper middle income nation. Panama's economy is traditionally focused on services and commerce at about 73.7% of our GDP. Thanks to our role as an intersection of world travel, Panama faced a great number of challenges thanks to the pandemic. But by the same token, we're projected to bounce back with gusto. Estimations vary, but the World Bank anticipates our GDP will grow by about 9.9 in 2021. The United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean sets its growth at 12%, and in 2022 at 8.2%. In the second quarter of this year, we recorded that our GDP grew more than 40%. As you might know, Panama attracts more than 50% of our region's foreign direct investment. And we have traditionally grown more year over year than our neighbors. And this is going to be no exception in this coming year. So what's the difference between Panama and other countries seeking investment? Panama has a combination of features that makes this ideal for your business, all concentrated in a very small place. Thanks to its geographical advantages, Panama is considered a foundational element of world commerce, but that's not all. Other countries can say that they have a convenient location, they can say they have proximus to the canal, and that they use the American dollar. But are they also free of natural disasters, have a good business climate, safety, stability, and quality of life? Panama has a democracy for over 30 years and has strived successfully to create an environment open to trade and favorable to business. For example, Panama has the Investment Stability Law number 54 of July 1998, which ensures the rules of the game that apply to your investment in Panama will not change, should this law change, for 10 years. Also, it's important to know that both foreign and national investors and their companies are equal with respect to rights and obligations in Panama. Investors in Panama enjoy the advantages of multiple tax, custom, labor, and immigration incentives offered by our country. We greatly value these investments, and most importantly, people committed to bringing their experience, knowledge, skills, and expertise to our growing business ecosystem. While we are aware that the size of our market is small, we are open to the world through free trade agreements that we have signed with our main commercial partners, and thus making our hinterland vast and ideal for any company wishing to open up the Latin American Caribbean market. At present, Panama has 23 signed trade accords with access to 59 countries by preferential agreements, allowing businesses in our country to reach more than 1.58 billion potential customers for products and services originating in Panama. This can apply to a great number of business activities, be that your logistics center, your manufacturing plant, your contact center, regional headquarters, or just about any part of your value chain where you need security, reliability, and quick access to your customers and suppliers. Through its investment regimes, Panama wishes to incentivize activities in certain sectors because of how they can benefit our country as a whole, with an emphasis on improving the quality of life for our people by attracting investments in projects that create great opportunities, job opportunities, a transfer of knowledge and technology, are sustainable and have a positive social impact in Panama and beyond. The sectors we determined that best lead us to this goal are: one, the digital hub, which would include digital services, technologies, back office activities facilitated by our now renowned digital connectivity. The logistics hubs, as you're probably aware, not just our capabilities in our ports, our multimodal logistics platform, but our vital role as an airline hub for travelers worldwide. The food hub, a more aspirational sector meant to take advantage of our logistical assets, our enviable weather, and create more job opportunities for people in our interior, along with other sectors focused on sustainability, such as tourism, forestry, and green energy production. Essentially, the kinds of industries that ensure a long-term future for our country and the world. With this in mind, Panama is poised to be your partner in growing your business and making it a success, especially if you would like to expand into the Latin American and Caribbean market. On behalf of ProPanama, we would like to wish you a productive and enjoyable conference today, and thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Stephanie, for this introduction and also to know a bit more about ProPanama. I think when you set up your office here, it's good to be in touch with them, because that is their job, is to promote investment in Panama, just as we are. They do it for everybody in the whole world, and we especially for the Dutch investing in Panama. So now I would like to give the floor to Mario Perdomo, who is from the Castro and Robles lawyers, and they help a lot of Dutch people here in Panama with all kinds of things, especially setting up offices. And so I'm happy he joined us, and we'll take you through the whole process of starting up a company. Mario, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Renko, and thank you. And everybody, hello. I'm very happy to be a part of this webinar. The point of my presentation today is just to give you a general glimpse of what it takes to establish a business in Panama. So I'll prepare a small presentation, basically bullets that I will be discussing over the course of the next few minutes with you. And should any questions arise, I understand there is a section of questions and answers once we finish. So how to establish a business in Panama? You can certainly fly over and do it in person, but usually the common vehicle is to do it through a legal entity. The most popular legal entity Panama has is corporations. They're commonly known. They're very basically mimicking corporations in the state of Delaware. And they have been basically the way of doing business for the past maybe 80 to 90 years in Panama. To establish up a corporation in Panama is quite simple. You need to provide your agent with the names of 3 individuals or companies that will comprise of a board of directors, and establish the general guidelines of how you wish to set up your company. The difference between a corporation and the other type of entities that we're going to discuss today is that the corporation maintains this anonymity. So the shareholders are not subject of public record. Some companies wish to have some sort of transparency or some sort of indication of who the shareholders or beneficial owners are. So they choose a different type of entity, which is a legal limited liability company. The requirements to set up either are quite similar, but they follow the guidelines of LLC in the United States of America. And you do have the indication of who the underlying owners are of the company. You can also already register your existing company in Panama as a branch. It'll be the same registration of that company. You're dealing with the same company as you were in your country of origin, and you need very few requirements in order to get that done. Basically, you have to transcribe all of the company documents, articles of incorporation. You need to issue a resolution in which you're deciding to open up a branch in Panama. You need to provide a balance sheet and a declaration as to how much capital you're going to dedicate to the Panamanian branch. This is a declaration, and similar to the other two entities that we have already discussed, there is no money down for the incorporation of the company. The same goes for the registration of the company as a branch. There are other entities that you might want to consider. For example, the purpose of your business here is not only to establish a business, but also to do some social work. You might consider going through the process of establishing a nonprofit foundation or association. This is a fairly straightforward proceeding that you do before the Ministry of Government, where you provide them with your plan, your mission statement, and you get a registration of the company for specific nonprofit purposes. There are other types of entities in Panama. These are a little bit more old-fashioned or less common, which are limited or general partnerships. These have been spaced out by the general use of the corporation. And also, if you have an interest in establishing some sort of asset holding entity, not necessarily associated to business, because it cannot engage directly in business, but just let's say you want to hold property, you want to put an apartment, your vehicles, chattels to the name of something that will serve not only as a holding entity, but also as some form of a trust or a will, then you might want to look into incorporating a private interest foundation. So what's the cost? Well, in any single scenario in which you have to incorporate one, the delivery times are basically the same. They go from 4 to 7 business days, and the cost, estimated cost, is from $1,200 to $2,500, including franchise taxes. And I'll get into that a little bit later. That includes your taxes for the first year of the existence of the company. That includes the services of the attorney that's going to incorporate the company, and it includes all notary charges and services. If you're registering as a branch, it takes a little more time, because obviously you have to transcribe most of your corporate documents, and depending on how much or how much documents you need to transcribe, it might take a while. If the documents are in a language different than Spanish, you have to translate them as well. And also the cost increases, because every single page that you dedicate to transcribing documents has to bear a stamp tax of $8. So if you have, let's say, articles of incorporation that are over 50 pages long, your cost is going to go up. One thing that I have not mentioned, and the general guidelines of estimates that I'm providing here, is for the standard that people use to incorporate in Panama. They usually use a fixed rate of, let's say, a capital stock of $10,000 or 500 non-nominative shares with no par value. But if you decide that you need to, for some purpose, increase your capital stock from the get-go, obviously your cost of incorporation will increase, because the calculations that I'm showing you right now are based on basically the standard that you use to incorporate a company. So what about maintenance? After year 2, what happens? Well, you have to pay the agent, then you have to pay taxes for just the existence of the company, which is called franchise taxes. And most agents are now including in their invoicing a cost related to compliance. I don't know if you're aware, but Panama recently has tightened up regulations on companies, and now lawyers have to perform very stringent know your client procedures in order to keep up with the regulator, in order to avoid fines. So usually those proceedings include additional costs. For example, running world checks on the clients to see if they have any criminal backgrounds, or they have been indicted for crimes, or they are performing an activity that is considered risky and demands a different type of reporting. So those costs are transferred onto the client. So we're talking about here maybe a yearly maintenance estimate of somewhere in the neighborhood of $675, a little bit less, a little bit more, depending on what you have set up. Okay, let's talk about now bank account opening, and also KYC considerations and bank policies. 10 years from now, it was quite easy to open up a bank account for an entity. Nowadays, banking regulations and know your client considerations have made it so that the process is a little bit longer, a little more stringent, and requires a lot of participation from the person that is trying to open up the bank account. We're talking about in an estimate of 1 month, if you provide all documentation that you need in order to get the account open and approved. So if you're factoring in the startup of your business, you need to take into account not only the time of incorporation, but also the time that you can actually be up and running with a bank account. And this is an estimate, and it might go longer, depending on where the beneficial owners or company are located, the type of activity. Perhaps the bank will require additional information that will just increase the amount of time that will take you to get a bank account started. So let's talk a little bit about taxes. Even though I do have my next slide that directly deals with rates in Panama, there's some general considerations. Panama has a territorial principle of taxation, which means that any income that is generated outside of Panama is not taxable in Panama. Another consideration that we have to take into account, and this is something that is often missed, is the fact that even though Panama has several regimes, some of which we're going to discuss later, and those regimes offer tax exemptions, the exemption itself does not imply that you're exempt from making filings. So even though you have an exemption, you have to procure the necessary certification attesting to that exemption and then submit your filings to the tax authority, even though the balance might be zero, or even if you're just reporting on transfer pricing, for example, you have to comply with the obligation to submit your filings on the scheduled basis of each tax or report. So let's go into a little bit on taxes. So I prepared this little chart, and it has a very simplified view of the main taxes that we have to take into account in Panama. Some of the taxes that are shown here have an asterisk after the rate. The reason for that is that depending on whether you're just basically starting out your business anywhere in the city or anywhere in the country, or you're starting out from a specific tax regime, has special rates and exemptions, those rates will be affected. But as a general rule of thumb, anything that we separate income into individuals and companies. So for individuals, whatever you make up to $11,000 a year, it's tax-free. If you're in the second bracket, which is $11,000 to $50,000 a year, you have a rate of 15%, and anything over $50,000 a year has a rate of 25%, which is identical to the rate that all company has from the get-go. There are considerations that you can, or there are specific benefits that you can apply, even though you're not starting up in a special zone or regime, but you could go to a specific small business authority in Panama and apply for certain benefits and exemptions that will allow you for a little bit of a break for the first 2 years of the company starting out. Let's talk about property. Let's say that you decide to buy property in Panama for your business or for your residential property. There's also a separation. The brackets differ based on the end rate is 1%, but the way that you do the property taxes in Panama is that you go based on brackets. So anything from $0 to $30,000, you don't pay any taxes on. In residential properties, there is a specific caveat. If you declare your property as your homestead, then that bracket increases up to $120,000. That's not the case for commercial property, which after the first $30,000, you get a 0.56% property tax. And you go up in residential from $30,000 to $250,000. That's the same 0.0%. In commercial, the bracket is a little bit bigger. It's from $250,000 to $500,000, 0.8%. And anything in the neighborhood of over $500,000, you get a 1% property tax. There's dividends or complementary tax, depending on whether or not you decide to withhold dividends or pay them out, which is 10%. That rate, depending on whether you're just in general in Panama or you are established in a specific regime, may vary to 0 or to a lesser percentage. There is the general VAT or GST tax, which in Panama is called ITVMS, which is 7%. And again, some companies, if established in specific regimes, may access the benefits of not being obligated to collect VAT or have VAT collected from them. There's the franchise tax that we talked about for companies. It's $300 a year is a fixed rate. I believe that the only one that is different is the private interest foundation, because it has a higher $400 a year rate. Then there's the business license tax, which is 2% on equity, and it's capped at $60,000. Again, some special regimes have either this exempt or this reduced, depending on the place that you're starting up your business from. And I added an estimate of municipal taxes because it will really depend on where you're starting out your business. Every single municipality, district in Panama has their own regime. They have a general guideline by law, but every single municipal regime has their own rates. So what I did was provide you with the rates for the city of Panama, which is the most common place to people to look into starting out businesses. And these are low. They actually depend not only on the earnings, but also in the activity. But as a general glimpse, if you're making up to $1 million a year, you'll be paying something in the order of $250 plus whatever the classification of your business given by that municipality assigns. So let's move into how to stay here. Because that is not only just setting up the paperwork for the company, it's actually getting a residence and getting a visa and, you know, going about and we're working, getting to know the place. So there's different options to apply for a permanent status here in Panama. I'm going to go through the ones that I have identified as the most common and most applicable to the purpose of this seminar. But I also like to give you a glimpse of how every single immigration process in Panama works, which is fairly simple. There's one basic registration, which you just show up at immigration, you provide your particular details, and you get registered in the system. That's step one. If you're from a country that requires specific, has restrictions on entry, then you might require a visa even before you come into the country. But after that, step two is preparing an application. So in order for any application in Panama, you need a full copy of your passport, including your entry stamp, a police record from your country of last place of residence or country of origin, a good certificate, which you can procure locally. There's an affidavit that immigration provides. You fill out with the same basic information that you provide when you get registered. And you provide pictures and you pay basically a repatriation deposit, which will cover your repatriation expenses if you were to be sent out of the country, and also immigration rights. Usually the repatriation deposit is $800 and the immigration rights are $250. However, some regimes have special rates or even waive this at all. For example, we're going to discuss later Panama Pacifico. Sorry, we're going to discuss later Ciudad del Saber, City of Knowledge. And the purpose of that specific foundation is to facilitate people coming in from different places to develop high-tech activities, investigation, research, and they have waived those, making it lesser, making the cost less to travel to Panama and to set up here. Also to consider is that if you're traveling with your family, you need to apply not only for you, but all of your dependents. Going right for that is that depending on whether your visa has the waiver or not on the deposits, you should have add something like $250 to $1,000 per dependent in order to set up your application process. So let's talk about the most common visas. There's the friendly countries visas. Panama has a list of something like 33 countries which have, let's say, an expedited process in which you can apply for a permit and eventually, after 2 years, procure a Panamanian permanent residency, which is quite helpful because you avoid the constant renewals that some other type of immigration permits have. There is the standard workers visa. Panama has a rate of 10 to 1. So for in general conditions, for every 10 Panamanians, you're able to hire one foreign worker. The worker visas are divided into the standard 10% and the 15%. 10% for any type of worker that you wish to include into your payroll. And then there's the 15%, which are specific managerial or technical positions that allow you to cap a little bit higher that 10 to 1 ratio to be 15 to 1. To cap higher the ratio to include those type of workers. Other things to consider is that some visas are not considered into the math of how many foreign workers you have in the company or not. If you're married to Panamanian, you're a foreigner, you won't count in the 10 to 1 ratio. If you have a friendly countries visa, you won't count as into the 10 to 1 ratio. So you will not be affecting the capacity of that company to add additional foreign personnel later on. Let's talk about, there's visas depending on if you're a self-sovereign person or investment. You have a set amount of an investment, and if you can procure that investment through proof to the immigration authorities, whether to purchase a property or startup of a business, then you will have access to a visa that does not require a work permit because you're basically being self-employed. In addition to that, there's other type of visas that are related to specific regimes. We're going to discuss two of those regimes today, but there are several others depending on the activity. These type of visas, they have a little more flexible or a lot more flexible requirements. They either abide very little by the 10-to-1 or 15% ratio, or not at all, especially the Ciudad del Saber, the City of Knowledge, because the idea is to bring as much people here that can contribute and to develop the activities that foundation wants to move forward. And there's also work permits. Every single visa, if you're engaging, also working in Panama, depending on the type of visa, you will require a pairing work permit. And you have to procure one and then the other. And it's kind of a cycle because at some point, the renewal of each one ends at the same time. So you have to time it quite right in order to avoid being fined for not having the documentation on hand. So let's talk about special regimes. Panama has several of them. I'm going to discuss two. I'm going to briefly mention the others. City of Knowledge, as I was told by Remco, that most of the people participating here, they come from a background of technology, of research. And City of Knowledge is a place for that. It's a foundation-owned zone that it invites people to either as students, as educators, as researchers, or people looking into developing technologies and research can come into Panama and to this specific base that was formerly a US base, set up their shop. They can either do it by leasing an office or going through a co-workings or applying for a grant. Before that, you need to actually get accepted by the foundation. The way that all special regimes in Panama work is that there is an entity that controls or operates each regime, and that you're basically dealing with that entity. So the regulator for your application and your entering into a specific regime is going to be that specific entity. In the case of City of Knowledge, is the foundation of City of Knowledge. In the case of Panama Pacifico, there is a company called London Regional, which is the operator of the zone. And if we go into the free zones, for example, as the Colón Free Zone, there's an authority, an officer from the Colón Free Zone that operates the regime. And the same goes for all fuel free zones, which are privately owned and also have an operator assigned via concession by the government. The good thing about these regimes is that they have several characteristics that would not apply if you were doing business elsewhere in Panama. Most of them have a one-stop shop, which means that every single paperwork that you have to do with government, you have to do it at one place, which is quite helpful because there's a lot of things that you have to do in order to get started. So let's take a look at City of Knowledge. City of Knowledge is, let's say, the business incubator, the technological proposal of Panama to bring in people in order to do some research, in order to invest in technology, in order to share that knowledge, in order to educate, in order to pass on that knowledge to Panamanians. So it has a one-stop shop service, as I mentioned. It has some benefits. Most of the benefits, however, different from what we're going to see later in Panama Pacifico, most of the benefits are people-oriented. So not necessarily business-oriented, but people-oriented. So you will see a lot of labor benefits. You will see incentives. You will see very flexible immigration permits. And obviously, you will see individual benefits to the people that are working from the City of Knowledge, such as the exemption for the imports of the goods or the household items. And if you fall into the scope of the general activities of the City of Knowledge, then you have access to basically an overall exemption on your activities. Panama Pacifico, different from what we have discussed on City of Knowledge, Panama Pacifico is a more infrastructure and location advantageous location place. Panama Pacifico, different from City of Knowledge, City of Knowledge does not have custom controls, does not have a lot of warehouses. It is meant for something different. It is meant mostly for what we just discussed. However, Panama Pacifico does have them, and it's quite near two ports in Panama. they have immigration controls, they have custom controls, they have warehouses, they have the capacity, you have the capacity to develop and to build in Panama Pacifico. Basically, what you're getting from City of Knowledge is already built, and you have to either lease an office there, or in some cases, if your activity is consistent with the activities of the foundation and you add to that regime, then you might be able to operate outside of the general area of the City of Knowledge. But Panama Pacifico, it's more looking into manufacturing, reprocessing, logistic activities, high-tech activities. They have a series of exemptions on that zone, but it's also more focused in development and in the move of manufacturing. No? So the exemptions tax-wise are quite broader in Panama Pacifico. You get a general exemption of all direct taxes if you are within the scope of the activities that Panama Pacifico, they have different brackets, but generally if you're into logistics, if you're into high-tech manufacturing, aviation, you're providing services offshore, you're providing services to the film industry. If you're providing services to vessels or aircrafts, then you're basically in the top bracket and you're exempt of everything. As I mentioned, exemption does not mean you're exempt from filing. It's that you have to file alongside the resolution that proves that you're exempt. You have immigration permits that are more flexible. They are not as flexible as City of Knowledge because they do have a cap of 15%, but still you have a specific amount of visas that you can apply for and eventually obtain also a Panamanian residency. You also have exemptions for people working there, but as well, the import of household items, the import of a vehicle. If you're importing goods in both Panama Pacifico and in Ciudad Saber, if you're importing goods for your operation or equipment, the import of that equipment is also tax exempt. So, in a gist, this is a general outline of the two applicable regimes, general outline of how setting up a business in Panama, what entails, what implies. And I would like to thank you all for your time. And Remco, I pass the conference up to you.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Mario. Just a second. Yeah, for explaining this and also on the different zones that you showed us. So now I think it's good to see if there are questions from the panelists, but first do some practical experiences as well, because Mario, this is all like how things should work in theory, but of course practice maybe is sometimes a little bit different, or just to see how it's going in reality. So we have found a great Dutch entrepreneur that I know very well, that has settled down in Panama some time ago and set up his own SA. So that's Henry Odink. So Henry, could you enlighten us a little bit on how the process went for you? What went well? What didn't go that well, or what was hard, and also some tips you can give others. Henry, the floor is yours.
Hi, Remco. Good morning. Good morning to everyone. Yeah, sure. Well, good morning, good afternoon. I think for the people in Holland, I see and I understand there's people from Holland, Curacao, and Panama. So yeah, sure. I can share some of the experiences, Remco. Indeed, I think it's good to mention that. The theory that Mario laid out very well and very detailed, I have to say, is indeed the theory. And in hindsight, it is also practice. But when you start your own business here in Panama, it feels more like a roller coaster than a well laid out plan, as Mario showed, right? So, so first a little bit about myself. My name is Henry Odink. I am Dutch, but I've been living in Panama for the last 7 years now. I came here with KPMG. I worked at KPMG before in Curacao, and they transferred me here to Panama. And 2 years ago, I started my own business, Pilar Finance. And Pilar Finance is a corporate finance advisory firm. So we help companies with financial projections, with business decisions, with strategic advisory. And we do that for both companies here in Panama as well as in Curacao, and we have some Dutch clients as well. But that's a bit about myself and about the company. The process of setting up a company here in Panama, for me, I think what helped was that I was already living in Panama. I had my residency here. I had a bank account here, and all of those things help a lot, I think, when you set up your company here. If you would come from Holland or come from Curacao and then set up your company here, I think it might be a little bit more complicated, and it's then very necessary to have, for example, a company like Mario Perdomo's, because a law firm can really help you and guide you in that process. I would almost say that it's impossible to do the whole process without a good lawyer. And that's, on the one hand, that's really nice because you know that there's people that can help you. On the other hand, I mean, if you look at how things would go in Holland, I think you can set up your own company. If you're smart, you go to the website and to the right agencies, and you can register your own company. Here in Panama, I think that's definitely different, and it's recommended to hire a law firm, and I would also say a tax firm for once you're setting up, or once you have been setting up your company here. So for me, since I was already living here, it went a little bit easier. Nonetheless, I went with a law firm as well. I set up a Sociedad Anónima, a public limited company. Yeah, I think a couple of things to take into account is that me as an entrepreneur, I thought I could set up my own business. But for the process of establishing a business, you need a legal resident, a legal representative. And beside that, you need 2 more directors to take part in the public documentation. Right, so you have I am the CEO of the company, but you need more people on the board. And basically, once I knew that, I had to look around and say, like, okay, so who else wants to be on my board? I'm an entrepreneur, it's my company. But that's one thing you should take into account. And it's also important later on in the process, because one of the benefits of being a small company is that despite all the taxes that Mario mentioned, there is a way to be tax exempt for the first 2 years if you're a small company. And that is by registering yourself as an AMPYME, a small medium-priced enterprise. Nonetheless, after almost 2 years of trying to do that, it turns out that there's a law that currently does not allow me as a Dutch person to have a company here that can enjoy the benefit of a tax exemption. And the reason is that since I am the legal resident, and the legal resident is not is not a Panamanian person, but a Dutch person, that tax exemption does not apply to my company. And it's a bit unfair because it's actually a Panamanian company that I established. So it's a bit strange that different rules apply for the same Panamanian companies, whether you are a Dutch owner or a Panamanian owner. But maybe I'll reach out to Mario after this and see if there's a workaround for that. But I mention it because it's important to take into account when setting up a company, to think about those steps as well. Who are you going to use as your legal representative? It can be a law firm, it can be a natural person. So that's something I think I would definitely suggest. Yeah, the 3 roles that you need as a director in the company are a president, a treasurer, and a secretary. But basically, that's just a formality. I think once you have your own company, you are in charge. Your company is basically operational once you receive a aviso de operación, which is an operations notice. Once you have that, you can actually start doing business and billing your clients. Yeah, another tax I think that was mentioned before as well is a municipality tax that I didn't really realize. So therefore as well, I mentioned it's important to have a tax advisor on board to guide you a little once you set up your company. I realized that I was not paying my municipality taxes, which is basically to the city of Panama. And I realized that once they gave me a fine, so then all of a sudden they could fine me my company. Before that, they had never mentioned anything about that to me, and it's also my own responsibility. I should have known, but that's something to take into account. So I would say For the legal process of setting up your company, it's very advisable to get in touch with a legal firm. Once you have your company, I think it would be good to have a periodic sessions with a tax advisor, because they really can help you in complying with everything and optimizing your tax structure, right? So I think that's some of the key points that I remember from setting up my company 2 years ago. Pilar Finance is also part of the Holland House, and I find it a very good addition to for networking. It's a great way to get connected to both Dutch, Curacao, or Caribbean and Panamanian companies. And it's a great way, I think, to get connected, especially when you just land here in Panama and you come from Holland or the Caribbean. I think those are the main points that I wanted to mention. Looking at the time as well, I think it will be interesting to see if there's any questions from participants.
Thanks, Henry, and yeah, also for saying that about the Holland House, and yeah, we can also do a virtual office for you or help you with your business location when you come to Panama and Ciudad del Saber. There's one more thing I want to ask you, Henry, because it's part of setting up a business, that is opening up a commercial bank account, your experience with that, because the process of setting up a business is very easy in Panama. Actually, in doing business or from the World Bank, the ease of doing business, Panama is the easiest country in Latin America to set up a business. But how is that with a bank account, Henry, commercial one?
Yeah, good thing to mention. I think once more, I was already living in Panama, and I have my personal bank account with a bank here in Panama, and that definitely helps. I think, or helped me to set up to open my bank account for the company as well, my commercial bank account. It is a bit more stringent nowadays. I think it's become that way over the last 2-3 years, especially after the inclusion of Panama in the Gafi list. So we were now in a gray list, which means that banks are more and more stringent on who they take in as clients. And I think that's the reason why currently it's not that easy anymore to open a bank account for your company. And I also don't know if that's something that law firms would typically help you open as well. But definitely you do need some legal documentation before you can open your bank account for your company. So yeah, my advice would be, if you already have your residence here in Panama, that would definitely help, and your bank account here. And if not, be prepared to submit quite a lot of documentation on your company, on your personal finances before actually you find a bank to accept you. And in that sense, also, there's almost like a pecking order in banks. There's the most prestigious banks that are actually more difficult to get into. And the smaller the banks get, the more easy it seems to get allowed into the bank. So that's a little bit on the banking account, Remco.
Thanks, Henry, for that. And now I would like to open the floor to the attendees. The questions they have to any of our speakers. You are two ways. You can type your question via the Q&A function in Zoom, or you can raise your hand so we allow you to speak. And I see we have Duncan Smith having a question, so I'll allow him to talk from Dutch VR. Duncan.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Police record, is that the same as a certificate of good behavior for us Dutch? Or do we need to have a different kind of document?
Mario, you're on.
Whatever document your country issues to attest that you have no criminal backgrounds, that's the one that you have to apostille and bring over. So if document you mentioned is the one that currently you use in Holland, then that's the one that you need to bring over, certifying that you have no background. Ideally, and not necessarily from your country of origin. If you've been residing elsewhere for the past 2 years, then you just bring one from that country. But yeah, it's whatever document serves the purpose of attesting the lack of any criminal background.
Thank you.
And add to that, I can add to that, Duncan, that in my case, indeed, it was a verklaring goed gedrag. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. VOG.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that question, Duncan. Let's see what else. Who else we have? I have a question from Lauren van Hoop. How do companies deal with COVID precautions within the companies? Who can answer that? COVID rules within companies, distancing, that's kind of things.
Yeah, I'll take that one as well. Now there is no restriction as to the amount of people in your office, but you have to comply with the general 2 meters of distancing. If you're not able to comply with 2 meters of socially distancing between employees, then you have to set up barriers, physical barriers, in order to, let's say you're working from a co-working and they only has 6 spots. You have to put plexiglass, and the employees have to wear masks and also face shields. There is also a protocol that was set up at the beginning of the pandemic. It has a lot of rules as to where to, you have to have a specific trash can for the mask. You have to have a committee of health, which in the case of an outbreak, or in the case of someone contracting the disease, immediately reports, immediately sends to that person to quarantine, has that person get tested for the disease, and has control and tracking and reports back to the controlling entity, which is the Ministry of Health, and also the Ministry of Labor. So there is a protocol in place that you have to still to abide by that protocol, but the restriction as to how much people you can have in the office, it's no more as of last year. Once the basically all of the economic sector started opening up and people came back to the offices. So nowadays it's meeting that 2 meters of social distancing, or if not, setting up physical barriers and complying with the protocol, the health protocol that's set up by Ministry of Health.
Okay. Thanks for answering that, Mario. Anyone else have a question, either live or in text?
Okay. I wanted to add something to the bank account issue, because I feel that it's quite important to stress this. What banks will ask from you is that you have some sort of bond or relationship with the country. So either you have an immigration permit, or either you have a business here, or you have a property here that in turn allows you to have an immigration permit. Then that will basically secure the procuring a bank account. The process is still slow. You're still gonna have to submit forms, basically attesting to your, the source of your income, the, who the beneficial owners of the company are, what is the source of those activities, and you will, depending on your activity, you will have to be reporting to a bunch of entities, not only to your agent, but also to your bank on a periodical basis on the status of the company. So the basic thing that banks will look for in opening up a bank account is that you have actually bond with the country, via a permit, via business, via an investment here.
Okay, thanks, Mario. So if there are no further questions, I think I'm going to close the webinar, but you can also send us by email afterwards. And also, if you're thinking of setting up a company, I'll also launch a quick poll just to know how many of you are actually thinking about setting up a company. So Mario can help you in the process. There's also other lawyers. We also have Delco, both lawyers that are also, we work with a lot for companies that want to set up businesses here. And for the rest, you can contact us, or PROPANAMA or Henry, I think, as well, is always open to give some tips on setting up. And we're here to help, and I hope this gave you some information on how the process works, on the taxes and everything, and hopefully we'll see you in Panama very soon. I'll just quickly see the poll. So there, I think it's about a tie. Share the results. Yeah, so of the people that voted, about half on some, maybe, or no. Most of you are thinking of setting up the company. A few are still not convinced. but 43% said yes. So, well, I hope this was useful to you. And thanks a lot. Thank you, speakers, Stephanie, Mario, Henry, for sharing with us. And I hope to see you in another event soon. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay.
All right,
Bye.
thank
Have a
you as
good
well,
day.
Remco, for setting up.